In Brooklyn, Tunde Adebayo was a king. Not the loud, chest-beating type. Not the gold chain, champagne-splashing type either. No. He was the quiet kind of king. The kind whose name opened doors before he touched the handle. The kind whose signature made other men rich. By 36, he owned 2 laundromats in Bed-Stuy, a thriving African grocery store on Nostrand Avenue, and a logistics company that moved goods from New York to Lagos faster than most people could spell customs clearance. People called him Mr. Adebayo with respect. With calculation. With need. But every night, when he closed his office laptop and the Brooklyn skyline blinked through his penthouse windows, the king turned back into something else. A small boy. Because no matter how tall his buildings grew in America, his shadow at home in Nigeria never changed size. The first time Tunde understood power, he was 9 years old in Surulere. His father, Chief Adebayo, did not shout. He didn't need to. When Chief cleared his throat, conversations ended. When Chief frowned, people apologized. When Chief said, "We will discuss this later," it meant judgment had already been passed. Tunde grew up watching men twice his father's size shrink in his presence. He watched his uncles lower their voices. He watched his mother swallow opinions. And he promised himself something dangerous. One day, I will never feel small again. America gave him that chance. Brooklyn was not gentle when he arrived at 22. It chewed immigrants alive and spit them into cold subways. He slept on his cousin's couch. Worked night shifts at a warehouse in Queens. Sent half his paycheck home every month because family is everything. He learned quickly. He learned that in America, money was louder than pedigree. He learned that hustle was a language everyone respected. He learned that if you kept your head down long enough, the world eventually looked up at you. By 30, he owned his first business. By 35, he stopped counting profits in thousands. He walked differently. Spoke differently. Negotiated differently. In Brooklyn, no one knew him as Chief's son. He was just Tunde. Self-made. Untouchable. Then his father fell sick. The call came at 3:14 a.m. His mother's voice sounded smaller than he had ever heard it. "Your father wants to see you." That sentence dragged him across the Atlantic. Back to Lagos. Back to heat and traffic and the familiar smell of diesel and roasted corn. Back to a house where he had once measured his footsteps. Chief Adebayo's bedroom was dim. The once mighty man looked like someone had quietly removed his spine. But his eyes? Still sharp. Still measuring. "Tunde," Chief said. "Not my son. Not welcome. Just his name." Tunde knelt instinctively. All the Brooklyn boardrooms in the world could not erase that reflex. "You have done well," his father said slowly. "I hear many things." Tunde nodded. Praise from this man was rare currency. "I built something here," Chief continued, his breath uneven. "Land. Investments. Connections. But your brothers." The pause was heavy. "They are not ready." There it was. The unspoken command. Take over. Come home. Carry the weight. Tunde stayed in Lagos for 2 months. In those 2 months, he realized something terrifying. Brooklyn power did not translate here. In America, contracts mattered. In Nigeria, relationships did. In Brooklyn, he negotiated from strength. In Lagos, he navigated invisible hierarchies older than his ambition. Uncles who once ignored him now called emergency meetings. Cousins who never invested a naira debated decisions like they were shareholders. Community leaders arrived with subtle threats wrapped in proverbs. A tree does not forget the soil that held its seed. You cannot become bigger than the roof that sheltered you. He smiled through it all. But inside, something tightened. At a family meeting in the living room where he used to study for WAC, his uncle cleared his throat. "Tunde," Uncle Bayo said, adjusting his igbada, "we appreciate your success abroad. Truly. But this is home. There are ways things are done. Translation, stay in your lane." Tunde inhaled slowly. "With respect, Uncle, the businesses need restructuring. The accounts are." A hand went up. Silence. The same silence his father used to command. "You have been away," Uncle Bayo said. "You do not understand the delicate balances here. Delicate balances. Code for power webs. Code for favors owed. Code for corruption politely disguised as culture." And just like that, the king of Brooklyn felt 9 years old again. Chief passed away 3 weeks later. The funeral was massive. Politicians attended. Business moguls shook hands. Drummers announced the end of an era. Tunde stood at the front, expression controlled. People whispered. That is the son from America. He will take over. He looks strong. If only they knew. Because when the will was read, the room shifted. Properties were divided carefully. Investments assigned strategically. But control? Control was left to a family council. Led by Uncle Bayo. Tunde received assets. He did not receive authority. It was a masterpiece of old-school politics. Chief had ensured peace. But he had not handed his son the throne. Back in Brooklyn, Tunde tried to resume normal life. But normal no longer existed. Conference calls with Lagos filled his mornings. Disputes over land titles interrupted his nights. Cousins bypassed him to speak directly to Uncle Bayo. Decisions he financed were reversed without consultation. He was funding an empire he did not control. One evening, in his penthouse overlooking the East River, he stared at the city lights. In Brooklyn, he could fire managers. In Lagos, he had to respect elders. In Brooklyn, loyalty was contractual. At home, loyalty was emotional blackmail. His phone buzzed. A message from his mother. Your uncle says the new warehouse project must be delayed. Delayed meant redirected. Redirected meant someone else's pocket. He typed back slowly. Why? Her reply came quickly. He says it is not your place to question. And there it was. Not your place. The breaking point came 6 months later. Tunde flew to Lagos unannounced. No family meeting. No warning. He walked into the main office of the family's construction company. Staff scrambled to greet him. He asked for financial records. Hesitation. He asked again. This time firmer. Uncle Bayo arrived within the hour. Tunde, he said calmly, you should have informed us of your visit. This is my business, Tunde replied evenly. Our business, Uncle corrected. They locked eyes. Generations collided in silence. You think money from America makes you chief? Uncle asked quietly. Tunde felt something snap. I think accountability makes me responsible. The air thickened. You are still a boy here, Uncle said. Do not forget that. There it was. The sentence that chased him across oceans. Still a boy. That night, Tunde sat alone in his childhood bedroom. The same faded paint. The same window facing the mango tree. He realized something brutal. He had built success to outrun smallness. But smallness had a passport. It traveled well. He could fight his uncle. Take legal action. Expose financial mismanagement. But doing so would fracture the family. And in his world, family fractures were earthquakes. His mother knocked gently. You must be careful, she said softly. Power here is not loud. It is patient. He looked at her. Was Dad ever powerless? She smiled sadly. Every king is powerless somewhere. The transformation began quietly. Tunde stopped fighting directly. Instead, he started building parallel structures. He hired independent auditors. Privately. He built relationships with younger cousins hungry for change. He invested in community projects in his own name. Not the family's. He learned the language of subtle dominance. In Brooklyn, power was visible. At home, power was layered. So he layered himself. When a land dispute arose, he didn't confront Uncle Bayo. He resolved it through a government contact he had cultivated independently. When a contractor tried to inflate costs, Tunde paid him personally, then blacklisted him quietly. He stopped asking for permission. He started creating inevitability. Months passed. The boy narrative began to fade. Staff started calling him directly. Community leaders requested meetings with him first. Even Uncle Bayo adjusted his tone. Not surrender. Adjustment. One afternoon, during a council meeting, a dispute arose about a major investment. Voices grew heated. Finally, someone said, let Tunde decide. The room stilled. It was small. But it was seismic. Uncle Bayo studied him carefully. Tunde spoke calmly, outlining risks, returns, timelines. No arrogance. No apology. Just clarity. When he finished, no one objected. Decision passed. Not by force. By inevitability. Back in Brooklyn, Tunde stood on his rooftop as winter crept in. He realized something profound. He had misunderstood power. In America, power was speed. At home, power was endurance. In Brooklyn, he had built an empire quickly. In Lagos, he was building something slower. stronger. He would never be Chief Adebayo. And maybe that was the point. Because Chief ruled with fear and silence. Tunde was learning to rule with patience and strategy. Power did not have to roar. Sometimes, it just had to remain. 2 years later, the family council restructured formally. Not dramatically. Just paperwork. Titles adjusted. Voting weights recalibrated. Tunde did not celebrate. He understood the game now. Power at home would never feel like Brooklyn power. There would always be history in the room. Always memory. Always ego. But he was no longer powerless. He had stopped trying to dominate. He had started learning to belong. And that shift changed everything. One evening, during a quiet dinner in Lagos, Uncle Bayo raised his glass. To Tunde, he said. The room paused. For bringing new strength to old foundations. It wasn't an apology. But it was acknowledgement. And sometimes, acknowledgement is more powerful. Later that night, Tunde walked outside under the humid sky. He thought about the boy in Surulere. The young immigrant in Brooklyn. The frustrated son in Lagos. He realized something that would have shocked his younger self. Powerlessness had taught him more than power ever did. It forced him to grow in ways success never demanded. It stripped ego. It sharpened strategy. It deepened patience. In Brooklyn, he had built wealth. At home, he had built depth. And depth, he now understood, was heavier than gold. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt powerful in one room and small in another, pause for a second. Because this is bigger than Tunde. Sometimes, success doesn't erase old hierarchies. Sometimes, growth requires facing the places where you still feel 9 years old. And sometimes, the real victory isn't dominating the room. It's no longer shrinking inside it. If you felt this, share it. Someone out there is winning in public but struggling in private. And they need to know they're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about power, family, legacy, and the battles we fight silently. Because behind every successful person, there's a room where they once felt powerless. And that's where the real story begins.